In the depths of the unknown, where shadows whisper and fear takes form, welcome to Classic Storytime Hub, the place where classic horror and mystery come alive. Tonight, I bring you a reimagined version of Cool Air by H.P. Lovecraft, retold with a suspenseful narrative style that grips the soul and breathes new life into this haunting tale. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the shadows.
You want to know why I recoil from a breath of cold air? Why a chill in the room makes me shudder more than most? And why the creeping coolness of an autumn evening fills me with dread instead of comfort? Some say I react to cold the way others recoil from a foul stench, and perhaps they are right. But I will tell you of the most dreadful experience of my life, and then you may judge for yourself. It is a mistake to think that horror belongs only to darkness, silence, or solitude. I found it in broad daylight, in the restless noise of New York City, inside a shabby boarding house with nothing remarkable about it, save for the secret it concealed. In the spring of 1923, I was scraping by with miserable magazine work, drifting from one cheap lodging to another, searching for a room that was at least tolerable. At last, I came upon a brownstone on West 14th Street. It was old, its former elegance stained and faded, but compared to the others, it seemed almost bearable. The rooms were large but musty, the wallpaper garish, the air tinged with the smell of stale cooking. Yet the floors were clean, the linens changed often enough, and the water usually hot. The landlady, a coarse Spanish woman named Herrero, kept to herself, and the other lodgers were quiet, withdrawn. Only the endless clatter of streetcars outside disturbed the uneasy calm. It was here, in this unremarkable house, that I would come face to face with a horror colder than death itself. I had been living there for 3 weeks when the first strange incident occurred. One evening, around 8 o'clock, I heard a faint spattering on the floor. At the same moment, I realized the sharp, stinging odor of ammonia had been in the air for some time. Looking up, I saw the ceiling dripping, liquid seeping down from the floor above. Alarmed, I hurried to the basement to alert the landlady. She rushed past me, muttering in her broken English, "Dr. Munoz, he has spilled his chemicals again. He is very sick, sicker every day, but he refuses any help. He bathes in strange solutions. He cannot bear warmth or excitement. His room is filled with bottles and machines. My God, the sal ammoniac he uses to keep himself cool." She vanished upstairs, leaving me unsettled. Soon the dripping stopped, and as I cleaned the mess and opened the window for air, I heard her heavy steps above. Of Dr. Munoz himself, I had never heard a sound, only the faint hum of some mechanical engine. His own footsteps, I would later learn, were soft, almost ghostly. I wondered then what strange illness could demand such secrecy, and whether his refusal of outside aid was mere eccentricity or something far darker. There is, after all, a peculiar sadness in seeing a once great man brought low by fate. I might never have met him at all had it not been for the sudden heart attack that struck me one morning as I sat at my desk. Gasping for breath, knowing I only had moments, I remembered the landlady's words that this mysterious invalid had once treated an injured workman. With the last of my strength, I dragged myself upstairs and knocked weakly at his door. A voice answered, calm, precise, and in perfect English. It came not from the door I faced, but from the door beside it. And then, slowly, that door opened.
A sudden rush of icy air struck me as the door opened. Though the day outside burned with the heat of late June, I shivered as I stepped across the threshold. What I found inside astonished me. This was no shabby boarding-house room. It was a gentleman's study. Mahogany furniture gleamed in the dim light. Heavy curtains draped the walls. Old paintings and shelves of books whispered of refinement and taste. The cluttered little chamber I had imagined was merely his laboratory. Here, in this spacious suite, Dr. Munoz lived surrounded by elegance. And then I saw him. He was a man of small stature, yet perfectly proportioned, dressed with impeccable formality. His face was noble, commanding without arrogance, framed by a short iron-gray beard. A pince-nez glinted before dark, penetrating eyes set above a sharp, aquiline nose that lent him a faintly Moorish cast. His thick, well-kept hair and high forehead spoke of discipline and intellect. Everything about him suggested breeding, intelligence, and distinction. And yet, as I stood in that unnatural chill, a wave of revulsion swept over me. There was nothing in his appearance to justify it, save perhaps the pallor of his skin, the unnatural coldness of his touch. But even these could be excused by illness. No, it was the cold itself, that dreadful, abnormal cold which filled me with unease. For when the natural order is broken, when ice lingers where heat should reign, something deep within us recoils in fear. My unease quickly gave way to admiration. For despite the icy tremor of his bloodless hands, the strange physician revealed a mastery beyond question. With a single glance, he understood my condition and treated me with the deft assurance of a man who had spent a lifetime in command of life and death. As he worked, he spoke, his voice finely measured, though oddly hollow, as if stripped of warmth. He declared himself the sworn enemy of death, a man who had sacrificed fortune, friends, and reputation in pursuit of experiments to defy it. There was something of the fanatic in him, yet also something benevolent, as he rambled on while preparing a draught of medicine. It seemed my presence stirred memories of better days, for he spoke freely, almost eagerly. His voice, strange though it was, carried a soothing rhythm. I noticed with a shiver that I could not even hear him breathe as his words flowed effortlessly. To distract me from my own weakness, he shared his theories, insisting that will and consciousness were stronger than the body itself. With proper preservation, he claimed, a human frame might endure, animated by sheer nervous energy, even when vital organs failed. Half in jest, he told me he might one day teach me to live, perhaps even without a heart. For himself, he confessed his maladies demanded a strict regimen. Heat was his enemy. A rise in temperature, if prolonged, could destroy him. And so his rooms were kept at a constant chill, 55 degrees, sustained by a system of ammonia cooling. The steady hum of its gasoline engine, I realized, was the sound I had often heard in my own room below. My seizure passed with astonishing speed, and I left that icy chamber not merely relieved, but converted, an eager disciple of the brilliant recluse. From then on, I visited him often, wrapped in heavy coats against the unnatural chill, listening as he spoke of secret researches and results so vastly they chilled me more than the air itself. His shelves groaned with ancient forbidden volumes, and though I trembled to touch them, I could not look away. Under his care, my own illness nearly vanished. He even spoke of medieval incantations, not as superstition, but as psychological forces, strange stimuli that might stir the nervous system when the body itself had failed. He told me, with a rare softness, of Dr. Torres of Valencia, his old colleague who had once saved him during a grave illness, only to die soon after, worn down by the extraordinary methods they had employed.
Munoz whispered that those methods were not the kind welcomed by cautious, respectable physicians. But as the weeks passed, I saw the truth. My friend was failing. His skin grew more ashen, his voice more hollow, his movements less steady. His mind, once sharp and commanding, began to falter. He knew it too. And with that knowledge came a grim irony in his words, a shadow that rekindled the unease I had first felt in his presence. Strange habits overtook him. He filled his rooms with exotic spices and Egyptian incense until the air reeked like the tomb of a pharaoh. And always he demanded more cold. Together we reinforced the pipes, adjusted the pumps until his chambers sank to 34 degrees, then 40, then 28. The adjoining tenant complained of the icy drafts, so we hung heavy curtains to seal the frost within. A morbid obsession seemed to consume him. He spoke of death constantly, yet when I hinted at burial or funeral rites, he only laughed, a hollow, joyless laugh that froze the blood in my veins.
In time, he became a disturbing, almost gruesome companion. Yet, out of gratitude for his healing, I could not abandon him to strangers. Each day I tended to his needs, dusted his rooms, and wrapped myself in a heavy coat against the unnatural cold. I even did much of his shopping, though I shuddered at the strange and baffling chemicals he demanded. A growing sense of panic seemed to hang over his apartment. The whole house was musty, but his rooms reeked of something worse, an odor that no incense, no spices, no pungent baths could disguise. I knew it must be tied to his mysterious ailment, and the thought chilled me more than the air itself. Even the landlady, Mrs. Herrero, crossed herself at the sight of him, refusing to let her son near his door. When I suggested other physicians, he would flare into sudden rage, though always restrained, as if violent emotion itself might destroy him. Yet his will only grew stronger. The weakness of his earlier days gave way to a fiery defiance, as though he meant to hurl himself against death itself, even as that ancient enemy closed in. He scarcely pretended to eat anymore. It was sheer force of mind that seemed to hold his body together. He began writing long, secret documents, sealing them with instructions that I deliver them after his death to certain men, scholars from the East, and even a French physician thought long dead, about whom unspeakable rumors had spread. I never delivered them. In the end, I burned them all, unopened. His appearance grew dreadful, his voice unbearable. One September afternoon, a repairman caught a sudden glimpse of him and collapsed in a violent fit. This man had endured the horrors of the Great War without flinching, yet one look at Dr. Munoz was enough to shatter his nerves. The doctor treated him, of course, but kept himself carefully out of sight. Then, in the middle of October, the horror struck, swift and merciless. One night, close to 11, the pump of the refrigerating machine broke down. Within 3 hours, the precious ammonia cooling was gone. Dr. Munoz summoned me with frantic thumps on the floor, and I rushed to his aid. I worked desperately, but my clumsy efforts were useless. His curses filled the air, hollow, rattling, lifeless sounds that chilled me more than the failing cold. I fetched a mechanic from a nearby garage, but the verdict was hopeless. Nothing could be done until morning. A new piston was required. The doctor's rage and terror grew monstrous, shaking what remained of his frail body. At one point he clutched his eyes in agony and fled into the bathroom, emerging with his face tightly bandaged. I never saw his eyes again. By dawn, the apartment was warming. At 5 o'clock, he retreated to the bathroom, commanding me to bring ice without end. I scoured the city, dragging back armfuls from drugstores and cafeterias, laying them before the locked door. Inside, I heard the restless splashing of water and that dreadful voice croaking, "More, more."
When the day grew hot, I begged Esteban to help, but his mother forbade it. Desperate, I hired a ragged loafer off 8th Avenue to keep the ice flowing while I hunted for the piston. The hours bled away in a frenzy of telephoning, subway rides, and frantic errands. I raged almost as wildly as the doctor himself, watching time slip through my fingers. At last, near noon, I found the part I needed. By 1:30, I returned with 2 capable mechanics and the precious piston in hand. I had done all I could, and I prayed that I was not too late.
But terror had already arrived before me. The house was in chaos, lodgers whispering prayers, rosaries clutched in trembling hands, the air thick with a stench that seeped from beneath the doctor's door. The man I had hired to fetch ice had fled screaming, his eyes wild with madness, yet the door was locked from the inside. And within there was no sound, save for a slow, dreadful dripping. With Mrs. Herrero and the workmen at my side, I forced the lock. We had flung open every window in the hall, but still we pressed handkerchiefs to our faces as we entered that cursed room, blazing with the hot sun of early afternoon. A dark, slimy trail stretched from the bathroom to the desk, where a foul little pool had gathered. Upon the desk lay a paper, smeared and scrawled in a blind, desperate hand. The trail then led to the couch, and there it ended, in a way I dare not describe. I struck a match and burned the paper after reading it, but its words are seared into my mind forever. They read, "The end is here. No more ice. Warmer every minute, and the tissues cannot last. You know what I told you about will and nerves and the preserved body after the organs ceased to work. It was good theory, but it could not last forever. There was a slow decay I had not foreseen. Dr. Torres knew, but the shock killed him. He could not endure what he had to do. The organs never worked again. It had to be done my way, artificial preservation. For you see, I died that time 18 years ago." And so it ended. Even now I cannot say what lay upon that couch. I only know this: I hate the smell of ammonia, and I grow faint at the touch of unusually cool air.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.